Today on the Two Car Garage, we put power windows in Curt's Bug. Alright, so here is the kit that we're going to be working with today. We picked this up from AutoLoc. I actually found it on eBay, purchased it from Johnny Law Motors. This particular kit is just a universal power window kit. It does not fit the door. We're going to have to do quite a bit of modification here to get it to fit. But the basic layout is we've got the track, and then the actual window mount is just cable driven off of the motor, and then the excess cable will hang out here at this blue tube. What we're going to end up doing, you'll see in a little bit here, is we're going to divorce the motor from the track, so we can move that off to the side, and then we'll just connect the motor back to the track just using some polyethylene tubing. The kit comes with the actual window mount. This will bolt on. This is also going to need to be modified in order to work in this door. So we'll get to that. And then the rest of the kit that wraps it up is we'll be using these window crank switches. These are pretty slick. It allows us to maintain the stock look in the interior using the window crank. And then with just taking one of these adapters, we'll just take one of these adapters that fits our window cranks. That slides in right there. And now we've got a momentary up and down switch that still maintains that stock look on the interior. So that's going to be pretty slick. All right, here we go. We've already installed it on the passenger door. That was kind of our first run, our prototyping, if you would, and figured out all of the little things that need to be done. While it's not going to be a difficult project, there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done. So for right now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get this window mechanism stripped out. I'm going to go ahead and pull the window scrapers out here. They just get in our way for a majority of the work that we end up doing. Alright, so now that we've got the door cleaned out, we've got the glass all cleaned up, we are really ready to start getting things installed here. I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to go ahead and get this switch installed. This is it, and we're actually going to lay it right it's going to be laid right here. So we've got the connections here for the wires. Those are going to be pointing slightly forward. But if I try to slide this up in behind, it doesn't clear the glass, because again, we've got the one-piece window which slides right behind here, and there's not enough space in order to fit the switch in here. So what we have to do is actually cut this section of the door out, so this will be able to fit up flush to the back side of the door. Along with cutting that out, I'm going to fab up some brackets that will allow us to attach this with some screws, so we can remove it in the future if we need to. is. Right now it's you can see it actually pretty solid. A little bit of flex in the sheet metal here, but once we put our handle on there, you know, all we're doing is using it as a switch. So now we've got, that's as far as you need to move it to go down, and that's as far as you need to go to move it up. So again, pretty slick little setup here. We've got the switch in, it's mounted. We went and made a few corrections to make sure everything is adjustable, and so we're set to go here. What we're going to do now is actually get the rest of the regulator mechanism installed and make this thing function. But there's a couple of modifications that need to be made to the kit in order for it to fit this small door. So what we have to do here is shorten the top section so it'll actually fit inside the door. But then the trickier part is we have to separate the motor from the track. Right now, if I put the motor up here where it actually fits in the door, the window won't drop far enough. So we need the window track to be way down here, but then the motor doesn't fit. So it's quite simple. We're just going to come in and we're going to cut the track. There's a tube right here that the regulator mechanism flows through, and we'll just trim that, and then we'll take the motor, we'll set it off to the side of the door, and then we just connect it with some polyethylene tubing. So it's really not a big deal. There's just a couple extra steps. Another issue is with the actual glass mount here. This is meant to sit in the door like this, and you run the screws into these two little bosses like that. Now these bosses float to allow for slight misalignment in the window mechanism. That's part of it being a universal kit. However, if I mount it in this fashion, the way it's intended, it doesn't line up with the opening in the top of the door. It ends up being way offset. What I found worked really well was just simply turning this around, which moved the glass to this side of the track. However, when you do that, when you mount it to the regulator assembly, these little washers that hold this boss in place, they get crushed up against these little plastic sliders and get jammed and don't let this actually float around. So what I had to do with the other window here is actually trim this off. This is just simply peened over metal, it's riveted in place essentially. Cut that off, and then I just flipped these bosses around to the other side and just moved the washers to this side. But once we get those turned around, then again we can mount this backwards, and we'll get the window track cut down, and then we can start bolting things together. So first things first, let's get over to the bench. We're going to get this guy modified just to get that out of the way. Now, I'm going to take this guy, slide that up into here. All right, so with our upper hole located here, our track is now bolted in at the top, and now we need to figure out what angle we need to mount this at. What I found on the other door when I first did it is that if I matched the angle of the existing window track here, it's way out here, and it's such an extreme angle that as the window comes down, the glass was actually hitting the front of the door. And looking at the glass, I can tell it's always done that. The original regulator was at this same angle as this track back here. What I've done to alleviate that problem is I've determined that because we only have one window track, the original two-piece glass, when we had the wing window, there was a second track here, and you would need to maintain this angle. However, because we have the one piece, what I can do is actually change the angle here to bring the glass down straighter so it doesn't run into the front of the door. And then I've just removed the bolt from the rear track, and what we can do is slide this back to match the angle we set up here, and then we'll just drill a new hole in this bracket and secure this back here. So that allows us to have a window that goes more straight up and down, so we don't have any issues in the front, but then we still have it tracking in this rear track. These one-piece windows are always kind of problematic because you don't have the front track. I did try to see if I could put one in there, but there's just not enough room to do it. And after making this change, I've determined that we don't need to put a track in the front. We simply rely on this rear one to keep it going straight, and there's not enough movement in the window mechanism to cause any problems. So that's the determination that we made here. All right, so now to get our motor in place here, this is the mount for the motor and the gear drive here. And now with this track bolted in place, you can see that we just didn't have enough room in here to get the motor installed while it was still on the track. What we're gonna do, so if I slip the motor back into the mount here, what we can actually do is take the motor and it'll slide in right here and hook underneath this little rib that secures the door panel. All I have to do is drill a couple of holes here, and then I can bolt the motor up tight. Now that will leave it a little bit loose, so what we're going to do is we're going to make another bracket that's going to come across these two bolt holes, and it'll tie into this existing mount, and then we're also going to stretch it across the door and put a mount here on this side. And there we have it. So now we have our window track mounted, and we've got our motor mounted. Now again, I don't have the motor on there, but I know that it's going to clear back here. The next part is going to be kind of the tricky part. We now have to connect these two portions. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our polyethylene tubing, and we're going to get that bent to shape. We also need to relieve this brace right here, because our tubing is going to come out and it's going to run right into that by the time it makes it around this corner. So we'll make a couple marks here right below this tube. So I'm just eyeballing it We'll mark that on both sides. And then we want to come just above this tube. We'll go right about there. And then because we're going to be wrapping around the corner, we are going to make this one, instead of this height, we're going to make it just a little bit wider. And simply all I'm going to do is take my cutoff wheel and slice down into this. I'm going to bend these tabs back, and that'll give us all the clearance we need for our polyethylene. Alright, so we've got this tab all welded in solid. We've got the brace all welded up. Went ahead and ground everything nice and flush. And so now, really, we can just go ahead and slap this back in and see how we did. And there we have it. So that motor is nice and secure. That's not going to go anywhere. All right, so now with the motor mounted and the window track mounted, we've got most of the hard work done. The next thing we want to do before we worry about getting the glass put in place is we do want to get these connected with our polyethylene tubing. Now you'll notice it's a pretty sharp corner we have to make here. And if I were to just put the tube on here and try to bend it up to reach there, there's a high likelihood that I'm actually going to kink this. And I want this to be as smooth of a transition as possible from this tube up to this tube. So what we're going to do is one little trick, kind of a cool thing you could do with this polyethylene tubing, is we're just going to warm it up, and it allows us to shape it where we want it. And then once it cools down, it's just going to hold that shape. So using a heat gun, we'll just warm the tube and bend it around. What you'll find though is as you heat it up, when you try to bend it, it will for sure it will collapse. So I found in my scrap pile just some 3-conductor round electrical wires. It's just household Romex type wire, and it fits exactly the inside of this tube. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shove this up in there where I want to bend it, and then that's going to help maintain the shape of my tube here. Well, here we go. Here's an up-close look of what's going on here. You can see this nice even bend all the way through here. This hasn't collapsed at all, so we know that our cable's going to slide right through there. If I come up over the top, you can see where it actually kicks over to go straight into the motor here, and it is not touching. It's a little hard to see from here, but it's not touching my cutout there. It's not touching the top or the bottom here, and that is good to go. So there we have it. There's our connection tube, and there's really only one thing left to do, and that is, if you look right here, you'll see a little tab that sticks out that's in this tube. That is so when I put my clamp on here, we're just going to be using a little hose clamp that keeps this from sliding off in operation. Well, I don't have that on the tube that I cut up top, nor is there any on this tube back here, which is where our blue exit tube is going to go. So what we're going to do here, quite simply, is I'm just going to pull all this mechanism out, and I'm just going to put a couple of quick little welded dots on each one of these tubes, and that's going to be in a position so when I put my clamp on there, it'll keep this tube from sliding off once we start operating the window. So let's just get this slid together here. So now we'll go ahead and get this bolted back into the car. We'll get this slid up into place, make sure everything's lined up, and then get our clamps tight. All right, well, here we are. We've got the whole mechanism remounted here. I've got the motor attached. I've got my bracket in place. You can see how nice and solid that is. It's not rattling. That's this extra track that's loose. So that's good. We've got the glass mount in place. That's ready to go. I don't have the glass in just yet. What I want to do before I go any further is actually get the motor hooked up, and I want to run this up and down and make sure it's actually going to function. All right, so I got my motor wires hooked up, and for a power source, I'm just going to be simply using my battery charger. And what we'll do is we'll just got to power up my battery charger, and now if I touch these together, the window goes up. And if I touch these two together, goes down. So I'm just going to run this through its range of travel, and I'll just take it all the way down. It's going to hit this bump stop, and it's going to stop automatically. There we go. So we know that it's working in the down position. And up, I am going to have to stop it before it gets to the top, because it's normally going to use the glass as it's stopped. But now let's go all the way up here. Stop it short. And there we have it. So I'll shut that off for a second. So now we know that this is working, and it works really smoothly. So the next thing we'll do is we'll actually get the glass in here. And that works just about perfectly. And there it is. So now we know that it's working. A couple of things we need to do. We're going to get this track taken care of back here, so we can get this lined up, figure out where we're going to drill our hole, and we're almost done. And now that puts my track in line with the glass when it's in its full down position. And that's where we want it. So we want to make sure that this is going to guide the glass and keep this area even and allow it to track smoothly. So we know that these two are going to be at the roughly the same angle here. Now we just need to drill a hole. And let's give this a run and see what happens. So we'll send it up. So we got our glass all the way up. Let's bring her back down. And there we have it, nice and solid. All right, well there it is. It is complete. So we've got everything bolted in tight. We've got the glass adjusted the way it's supposed to be. We've got the switch mounted, even though it's not adjusted correctly. We won't worry about adjusting it until we have a door panel. In fact, the door handles, or the window handle's not even attached right now. But all in all, pretty happy with that. You got an automatic down window, automatic up window, and again, nothing has been lubricated, so I think once we get everything greased up and taken care of there, it should actually operate a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer for us. We still have some painting to do. All of these new brackets that I made for the motor, for the switch, and some of the metal I've been grinding, I do want to throw some paint on there. But I'm not at all worried about that right now. We're going to wait until after the car comes apart for final paint. But really, things are looking pretty good. Well, that's all we have for today. I know this was a long one. There's a lot of little things we had to take care of here, but hopefully you got something out of it. And if you're looking to attempt to install power windows in your Beetle, you've got at least one method that we know is working. That's all we got. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.